That was arguably one of the greatest presidential speeches in American history. The background music was Time by Hans Zimmerman, and my name is Jordet. I am hosting TZM Global Radio Show from the Los Angeles chapter of the Zeitgeist movement, and today we are going to take a quantum leap into the future of global transportation. Our very special guests joining us are the CEO of ET3, Daryl Oster, and also Zev Paiss, the Executive Director of the Aster Foundation. How's it going, Daryl?
Hey, it's going good, Joseph.
Good.
Thank you for inviting me.
You betcha. And how about you, Zev? Everything good in your world?
I'm good, Jordet. Thanks again for the invitation. Appreciate it.
You bet. Did I pronounce your last name right? Is that Paiss?
Paiss, yes.
Paiss. Okay, awesome. All right, so before we get started, let's talk a little bit about that intro piece. Do you think that speech from 1961 relates to us today, Daryl?
Oh, most definitely. In fact, if you go to the ET3 YouTube video, we start out with that speech. It's a different version of the speech of going to the moon. You know, setting the goal of putting a man on the moon in 10 years, and not knowing how it was going to be done, but making that bold act of leadership that has really paid huge dividends for Americans with all of the trickle-down benefits of the space program. All of our telecommunications and computer technologies started from that space program.
Right. And how about you, Zev?
I think what's most impressive is leadership that inspires people. We certainly seem to be lacking that today, and I think we need that inspiration in many systems, transportation certainly being a really primary one.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I hear the excitement of Kennedy plunging forward into the unknown and the crowd's enthusiasm, and it's a bit frustrating to me listening to that speech today because it seems like we veered off track as far as pushing the boundaries. You know, although, like you said, we've made incredible leaps and bounds in scientific breakthroughs, transportation technology seems to have stagnated along the way because we're still burning fossil fuels faster than we can dig them out of the ground. We're still sitting in traffic, which just continues to get worse and worse each year, and we're still spending hours and hours at the airport terminals going through security and luggage screening only to finally get packed into a metal tube like sardines in order to reach our international destinations 18 hours later. So what's the solution? Let's start with you, Daryl. Your company is ET3. What does that stand for?
ET3 stands for Evacuated Tube Transport Technologies. Or some people say it stands for Everyone Takes the Tube.
Okay, and
what ET3 is it is a literally brings space travel conditions down to Earth. Car-sized vehicles are magnetically levitated, and they operate in an evacuated environment inside of tubes that have no air in it. So it eliminates almost all of the aerodynamic resistance. These car-sized vehicles are magnetically levitated, which eliminates the rolling resistance. So once they get up to speed and merge on into the flow of traffic, like a car merging onto a freeway, they're inside this tube network, and they coast for the entire trip using no additional energy or very little additional energy. And then when they arrive at the destination, about 90% of the acceleration energy that was used to accelerate the vehicles up to speed can be recovered at the other end when they slow back down. So we can accomplish about 50 times more transportation per kilowatt hour of electrical energy compared to the most efficient electric car or electric train.
That is incredible. And how do you fit into the picture, Zev? Tell us about the Aster Foundation. What does that stand for, and what's the purpose of the foundation?
Well, Aster, A-S-T-E-R, stands for Alternative Sustainable Transportation, Education, and Research. And we are a 501c3 foundation based here in Colorado that focuses on solutions for sustainable transportation. And we focus in on the long-distance travel, exactly the type of thing that Daryl is working on. Also, much slower transportation within cities where it would make sense within that, as well as the first and last mile, where it could include things as simple as skateboards or roller skates or non-fossil fuel type bicycles, things like that. So we're really trying to push the boundary on what kind of new transportation systems can we put in place that are going to adapt to our needs for movement, as well as the reality of the depleting fossil fuel reserves.
Okay, and you guys are hosting a conference in October in right outside of Denver. Tell us about that.
The foundation is still fairly new, so we are using this conference in October, the October 10th and 11th, to both introduce the foundation as well as to provide a pretty intimate venue for people like Daryl to be able to give his presentation, to explain what the ET3 concept is, as well as a variety of others. We have about 10 speakers, and give these presenters an opportunity to explain their technology, to answer questions, to give participants a chance to really meet these people face to face, and also for the presenters to ask questions of one another, because there's a lot of different systems out there, and I personally believe that they can be very complementary and support one another as we're building systems for short, medium, and long-range travel.
Okay. So, Daryl, what are the main kind of objections that you get when you first start talking to people about the ET3?
Well, there's all kinds of disbelief initially, but then when people start to realize how achievable this is, then the typical unreasonable fears start to surface, like, will I feel claustrophobic? Or,
right.
Some people may feel that way, but if you have no trouble getting in a car, you should have no trouble getting in the ET3 capsule. The ET3 capsules are actually a little bit bigger volume-wise than all but the very largest SUVs.
Right. So people, I've had a lot of people when I mention it, they're like, well, how will the human body withstand the G-forces?
That's another one that typically comes up. What we have decided to do is go with what is already proven to be acceptable by most people with cars. Cars have globally won the transportation market. So we are taking the known operating conditions of automobiles and applying it directly to transport. The G-force of an automobile, almost any car on the road, if you step on the brakes full force, is about 1 G of deceleration.
Uh-huh.
And for most people, that might be kind of uncomfortable if you're sitting up vertically and all you have is that little narrow shoulder strap to keep you from lurching forward. So with ET3, the seats will be reclined back at a much more comfortable angle, so you will not feel thrown forward. You'll just be pressed down in the seat just a little bit as the vehicle decelerates. So using that same rate of deceleration and acceleration that sports luxury cars are capable of, if we extend out that same rate of acceleration with ET3 for 3 minutes, you're going 4,000 miles an hour. With ET3, that acceleration and deceleration will feel much smoother than it is in a car, though. It will be brought on gradually over a 2-second interval instead of just slamming the pedal down to the metal and slamming on the brakes in just a couple tenths of a second. If it is brought on smoothly, then people have a chance to smoothly adjust to the change in acceleration or deceleration vector. So just using what's already proven in cars, we can use those same levels of acceleration with ET3 and just extend them for a longer period of time. And it only takes 3 minutes to get up to 4,000 miles an hour.
Wow. So it's similar.
20 seconds to get up to 350 miles an hour.
How long was that?
20 seconds to get up to 350 miles an hour.
Wow. So.
And that's of course not nearly as fast as a top fuel dragster will get up to that range of speed, 300, 350 miles an hour in 3 or 4 seconds.
Right. So basically, it's kind of like when you're in an airplane today, and when you take off, you get pressed into the back of your seat. But once you reach cruising speed, it feels like we're just sitting here like we are now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And in fact, all of us right now are on spaceship Earth traveling 67,000 miles an hour in orbit around the sun. And the sun is traveling 200,000 miles an hour in orbit around the Milky Way. So we're traveling somewhere in between 133,000 miles an hour and 267,000 miles an hour in our orbit around the Milky Way on spaceship Earth. The average human travels over 200 billion miles during a typical lifetime without burning a drop of gasoline. So we are taking what is already proven to be the most proven form of transportation in the universe and bringing those space travel conditions down to Earth so that everybody can use them on a daily basis instead of just a few lucky astronauts.
So when you put it that way, 4,000 miles per hour doesn't really seem that fast anymore.
Right.
It seems like something that we could be totally acceptable. Now, is that for like getting across the country, like from LA to California, or is that international?
Those higher speeds will probably be reserved for international. Cross country from New York to LA it could be at those speeds, but it would probably be more likely to be in the 2,000 mile an hour range, so you can have more frequent stops. Because you cover about 103 miles accelerating up to 4,000 miles an hour. So if your stops would be then a couple hundred miles apart. So we might want a few more access points in there on a transcontinental, across the country. But when we get into the transcontinental stuff, going from New York, for instance, up across Alaska, across to Canada, across the Bering Strait, that would be on the global backbone that would operate at about 4,000 miles an hour. And only crossing 90 miles of ocean could connect most of the world's population.
Oh, okay. That would solve the issue of trying to go across the Atlantic or the Pacific then.
Yes, it's much more expensive to cross oceans, so the cheapest place to cross is the Bering Strait.
Gotcha. So Zev, what about the last mile? Like, how do I get from my house to the portal station? What's new and exciting coming up there?
Well, and that's a good question. I want to just address something that Daryl said that I think is really important.
Okay.
Is almost all of the conversation that people are talking about is, the challenges of transporting people these long distances at these high speeds, and there's not enough, I think there's not enough conversation about what do we really need to be moving and at what speed. And if I'm talking about moving something at that speed, I think it should be freight. I think it should be critical medicines. I think it should be gear that is required to help a disaster.
Right.
So I think that there's absolutely an important need to move things at those high speeds. It may or may not be it may be things more than people, depending on the circumstances. So I think it's important to understand the purpose of transportation and why are we trying to get one thing from a place to another. And then it leads into your question of that first and final mile. For the most part, a lot of people stay pretty close to home.
Uh-huh.
So they need to be able to get from their home to the things that are important to them, be it work or school or the doctor's office or the market, or if they're going someplace for entertainment that maybe is further away. So here we have the opportunity to use things like anything from electric bicycles to a personal rapid transit that is designed to be just within communities. One of the presenters at the conference is with the Gondola Project, and he's going to be talking about gondolas that are being installed around the world in places that are difficult to traverse because of the topography or just because of the density, that it's easier to just hop into a small gondola, travel 25, 30 miles an hour, and go across town in that way. So I think these issues are global, and it's not always going to be the same in every part of the world. So part of it is to be adaptive to what makes most sense where you live, and for what movement do you need to be part of.
That makes sense, and it also brings me to my next question for you is, with the Google's driverless cars, I kind of foresee that as like the end-all, be-all of the personal rapid transit. So if I could whip out my smartphone and and launch my transportation app and just say I want to go from my current location to Paris, France, and 5 minutes later an autonomous vehicle pulls up, picks me up, takes me to the tube station, and a couple hours later I'm over in Paris. Is that still going to? Is there other things that I haven't thought of where there would be other forms of personal rapid transit needed, or do you think that autonomous vehicle technology will eventually be it?
I think one of the biggest challenges is always infrastructure, and because as Daryl described, the automobile has won that battle. We have roads pretty much everywhere in the developed world. So that's why I think we're seeing a movement toward things like autonomous driverless cars. But I'm pretty sure that we aren't going to be able to maintain the roadway infrastructure as we have, and we're going to need to re-densify a lot of our urban environments, and certainly leaving transportation pathways. But I don't know that it's going to be what we have now, because I personally believe we need to bring other elements back into the city, like agriculture, and more manufacturing and more jobs on a local level, and the transportation network will then focus much more on helping us get from here to there in that. But it's not going to be, I don't believe it's going to be automobiles that we just call on and it drives us wherever we want to go. I think we're going to need to think a lot more efficiently than that.
That makes so much sense. I didn't even think about that, about the maintenance of the roads and all of that stuff. So in the future, we'll probably be building roads that are more, or not roads, but cities that are more aesthetic and more sustainable and stuff, without so many roads, more like pathways or gondolas, or like the what's Bill do, the
J-Pods.
J-Pods, yeah, that's cool technology too. So Daryl,
and that feeds into what Daryl was saying, where if you can have compact communities, then you can have a tube, some kind of a high-speed evacuated tube system that goes from city to city very easily, much easier than we have now. So I think that this whole movement in that direction is going to make all of this work better.
So Daryl,
I think they're really. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I just think they're really complementary technologies. The automation of transportation and the overhead guideways, with the car-sized and smaller vehicles that run autonomously from origin to destination, but in a network where all the speed and flow is coordinated and automated so it can achieve much, much greater capacities with much fewer resources. And, the automated PRT is a big step beyond just the automation of cars. If we could look at this with the same parallel as automation in communications has taken place, 100 years ago we had switchboard operators. Could you imagine how many people it would take to switch all of the cell phone traffic and internet traffic? There wouldn't be enough people in the world, and if there were enough people to do it with manual processes, what would the error rate be? What would the misconnected calls be? Orders of magnitude more errors and mistakes than we have with our automated telecommunications that take place at the speed of light. So we're only talking about automation of transportation, which, if we look at the Google car, which is automated and now legal in 3 states, that would be kind of like the 300 baud rate modem, and then maybe PRT might be DSL, and then something like ET3 might be gigabit fiber.
Right. That's cool. I just read an article a little while back that said the biggest concern for the transportation industry back in the day before automobiles were common was the amount of horse poop that was going to pile up in the city. They did not know how they were going to handle that. So it's kind of along the same lines. I asked Zev that question about autonomous vehicles because I'm thinking cars. That's what I've been programmed to think, and I'm not thinking about all those other options. So now that you've brought that to light, I can kind of see past that and see the uses for the J-Pods and stuff like that. That's really awesome.
Imagine being able to tell your kids to go out and play in the street.
Yeah.
And imagine 3 other streets torn up and turned into gardens.
Yeah. Incredible. So what about the expenses of building this? It sounds, I mean, a lot of people, that's what they one of their concerns is it sounds like it's really going to be expensive to build. Is that true?
That's where it gets really exciting. It is, with ET3, we're using a lot less materials and using them much more effectively. Mm-hmm. A ET3 capsule, car-sized vehicle, it doesn't have an engine, doesn't have a transmission, doesn't have wheels and tires and fuel tanks and all those heavy components. So we only have a 400-pound empty vehicle weight to haul the same 800-pound payload as a typical car. So we only have 1,200 pounds of load to support on a bridge span. So if we compare the infrastructure required to support 2 1,200-pound vehicles crossing, that's only a little over a ton of load to support on a bridge. If we look at a 100-ton locomotive and 2 of those passing on a bridge span, that's 200 tons of live load. So ET3 can be built using 1/35th of the amount of concrete and steel compared to the amount of materials required to build infrastructure for high-speed rail. So we can build ET3 for 1/10 of the cost of high-speed rail, and it will actually have a much greater capacity because the frequency of vehicles is not limited by a physical moving switch. We use an interchange philosophy like a car on a freeway, except we're automated and we can, the automation can make decisions so much faster than humans can, so we can actually achieve much higher capacities, 10 times the capacity and 1/10 of the cost. So that's 2 orders of magnitude improvement in material utilization and the efficiency of the use of those materials. So the cost of operating ET3 is about 1/50th of the cost of operating a jet aircraft on a per passenger basis. So ET3 will likely start out at a similar cost to flying or driving, and very quickly, as the systems are paid for, drop to somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/10 the cost, still leaving plenty of profit potential for local contractors to operate everything.
That's incredible. And does that the less expensive hold true with you with the local PRTs as well, Zev?
Well, for the same reason that Daryl mentioned the cost savings, we're talking about a very small amount of resources and very focused. So part of the question is really who is going to fund it, and that's going to be an important conversation that we're going to have at the conference. We have an ex-county commissioner who's now focused on regional transportation issues, talking about the role of government in this. And my hope is the role of government is to get out of the way, and like commercial air space traffic and space travel, that private industry will be jumping on all over this and saying this is something we feel that we can be paid back for in a very timely basis. Sure, Daryl can give you some payback numbers that are pretty incredible, and so I don't think we're going to need to ask our governments to pay for this, but that we actually can pay for these ourselves.
And that brings us.
I think you bring up a really good point, Zev, about the role of government in this. And much of the role of government has already been served very effectively by establishing all of the important right-of-ways between major cities. And there are also other right-of-ways, and those right-of-ways can easily be used by personal rapid transit automated transportation systems like we're talking about, including ET3, which is a subset of automated personal rapid transit. So a lot of investments have already been made by government, and it's a matter of understanding that those investments can be leveraged to have a whole new purpose and a whole new use without disrupting the existing use.
So it really seems like the hardest hurdle is probably not going to be the science or the technology of this. It seems like that's pretty well in hand, but it's going to be cutting through all the red tape of getting the right-of-ways and stuff like that. Is that true? Yeah,
that's exactly right. According to Frank Davidson is an amazing individual. He is the one that that founded the English Channel Tunnel Study Group and chaired that organization for 35 years or so that it took to complete the English Channel Tunnel. And he told me that only 10 to 20% of the issues were technical, that 80 to 90% of the issues involved diplomacy and figuring out how to cut through that red tape that you described.
Yeah, I totally believe that. And one of the hopes that I have, I've been involved in putting together unique kinds of events and conferences for the last 20, 25 years, and my hope is to bring together groups of people who normally would never be in the same room together and let them talk to each other, ask questions, figure out ways that they can collaborate. And I think that is one of the real purposes of the foundation, is to be able to accelerate the research, development, and implementation of this whole new level of transportation that we really desperately need. So I think that we'll be able to cut through some of that red tape by bringing the right people together in the same room.
What would you say are those right people? Who should attend this conference?
Well, certainly there is the technology side. There are people who have come up with the various different transportation modes. There's one of the women who's going to be speaking is talking about siting, kind of using GIS technology to figure out what's the best place to put these for infrastructure reasons and to cut down on the political issues and the expense and things like that. Certainly we need to have policymakers there because they're going to be sitting at the table when we go to request right-of-ways for these things. We also really want to have investors, people who see the future and realize that by putting money in now, they're going to be paid back 10 times. So it's really, and business leaders, businesses that are possibly already thinking about what's their next move. And I know that when Daryl had all the recent publicity out in connection with a Hyperloop, there was several pieces that talked about different manufacturers that are already kind of hooking up with ET3 to think about how they're going to make the tubes and how they're going to make the risers that the tubes sit on and things like that. So there's whole industries that are really in their infancy at this point that are really going to come into their own, and those are the people we want to have at at our conference.
Right. Is Elon Musk going to be there?
He's been invited. Okay.
So Daryl, you met recently with Elon and the Hyperloop. How similar is his idea to the ET3?
Yeah, Elon called about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago and invited us to get together at SpaceX, which we did, and had a very interesting meeting. And we really want to commend Elon Musk for having the courage to step in front of a train, a high-speed train. And he had the courage to say that, this is foolish to build what's going to be the most expensive and slowest high-speed rail system in the world.
You're talking about the high-speed rail between Southern California and, or actually L.A. and San Francisco, right?
Yes. And so what his Hyperloop idea, he's made a big step in the right direction. And when he started, talking about this with his people, he said that some of them were telling them that ET3 might be a couple steps ahead, and that he should call us and learn more about it as he was, preparing to make his announcements and stuff. So we really had a very good meeting, and he explained that, his reason for open sourcing this is to benefit companies that can take that and improve upon it, and that he supports the best technologies that will move the United States forward in innovation instead of following the followers in high-speed rail that are actually following our example from 1889 when high-speed rail was first invented here in the United States in Laurel, Maryland. The first electric train operated at, experts measured it at 120 miles an hour, and then credible witnesses later said it went 180 miles an hour before it derailed.
Wow.
And then Germany took that technology, and by 1904 had an electric train operating at 130 miles an hour. And then France and Japan built the high-speed rails, and a lot of Europe. So they're really following our example. So you can't lead by following, and you certainly can't lead by following the followers that are following us.
Right. Now, Elon voiced a concern that I read in his the alpha document that he put out on Hyperloop about ET3 tubes being able to maintain that kind of a vacuum. Do you remember? Did you read that?
Yes, I did. In fact, if you look at the page 24, I think is where he talks about the vacuum level in the Hyperloop Alpha plans, and we are very concerned about optimizing the level of evacuation of the tubes for ET3 instead of just throwing a number at a dartboard. The optimal level is really fairly apparent from looking at that chart of a single-stage pump in Elon's document. It shows that the efficiency doesn't start falling off for single-stage pumps until you get down to 10 to the negative 3 to 10 to the negative 4 torque, which is between 1 millionth of an atmosphere and 1/10 millionth of an atmosphere, or 99.99999%, or add one more 9 to that. He's talking about, with Hyperloop, removing 99% of the air in some places in the document, and then other places in the document he talks about removing 99.9% of the air. So he's offering a range of 1/100th of an atmosphere to 1,000th of an atmosphere, and we're talking about a millionth of an atmosphere to 1/10 millionth of an atmosphere. So, roughly an order of 10,000 difference. But even the level of vacuum that we're talking about is far from a pure vacuum. The typical television set, the old CRT television set, requires 1,000 times higher quality vacuum than required for ET3 just to function. And those TVs will maintain that vacuum level for 30, 40 years and still function. High-powered radio station tubes are evacuated to 1,000 times higher quality vacuum than that, 10 to the negative 9. And in fact, there's the LIGO Observatory for measuring gravity waves in Louisiana is a tube several miles long that has over 50 kilometers of welds in the tube, and it's evacuated to 1 million times higher quality vacuum than needed for ET3, 10 to the negative 9 torque. And it had no measurable leaks for 2 years without the vacuum pumps even. So there are off-the-shelf technologies. There are 8 valves off-the-shelf that are rated to 10 to the negative 6 torque, or 1,000 times higher quality vacuum than necessary for ET3, that are 50 or 60 inches in diameter, bigger diameter than required for ET3 capsules to pass through. So off-the-shelf parts are already in volume serial production that operate at much higher ranges of vacuum and with very, very low leak rates.
So basically, vacuum technology is totally mature.
Yes, and even as stated in the Hyperloop document on page 24, the graphs show very clearly that the efficiency of the pumps, even for a single-stage roughing pump, starts falling off at that 10 to the negative 3, 10 to the negative 4 area. So we're concerned with the vacuum level that creates the greatest value. That is, minimizes the costs of producing it and maintaining it, but maximizes the benefits derived from it. And so that benefit to cost ratio is really value, and that's what always wins the market in the long run. So we're talking about optimizing the vacuum level for creating maximum value in transportation. And I believe that if Elon and other experts look into the vast amount of research that we've done on this topic for the last 15 years, that it will become readily apparent where that range is likely to be. And with a lot better tools that those very impressive companies like Elon Musk, SpaceX undoubtedly have, and a lot more experts looking at this, we could probably get even better with those numbers and make further improvements.
Wow, that's incredible stuff. So go ahead, Zev.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that the other piece of this that has to be addressed, and Daryl actually mentioned it, is the whole idea of the electric trains. And the question is, what is going to power all of these systems in the future? So another entire industry that I really want to make sure is in a discussion is the renewable energy industry. I think in the Hyperloop document he talked about if you were to put solar photovoltaic cells along the top of the track, you could get a megawatt per mile, something like that. So I think there's an incredible opportunity for renewable energy companies that generate electricity to be able to be part of this system so that we know that we are not going to be dependent on fossil fuels to run these systems.
So with that being said, how are we going to get the status quo to release their white-knuckle grip on the fossil fuel energies and that stuff?
Well, I think that any industry that is disruptive can be perceived as a threat, but it can also be perceived as an opportunity. The Luddites perceived the automated mill for weaving fabric as being a threat to their industry, and it was, but that disruption of that industry created so much more value, so much faster for many more people that rising tide floats all boats. And so the perception of threat can also be the perception of opportunity. So we see ET3 as being an opportunity for the oil industry to add a lot more value to their product. And instead of taking $100 a barrel crude oil and refining it just a little bit into $200 per barrel motor fuels, why not refine it into $500 a barrel high-tech plastics, or $1,000 a barrel, or $2,000 a barrel high-tech aerospace plastic, and revolutionize the building industries with super insulating panels that can cut labor costs and cut energy costs in buildings and benefit a lot more people for a lot more generations, because the materials, the use of that oil resource is now recyclable and not going to be burnt and not continue to add value to the economy. So those oil companies that see this as an opportunity to add more value to their resource that they've already spent the money to access will use less of that resource but bring more value to it for far greater people and create higher profits for the shareholders for a much longer period of time.
And Zev, how do you feel that's going to affect the more local stuff? Because I know the car industry will kind of start freaking out if nobody wants to drive cars anymore with PRTs.
Well, yeah, I'm not so concerned about them really losing. For example, electric cars. I believe last year in the U.S. about 52,000 electric cars were sold, and that's a pretty good number. But with 240 million cars in America, it's not going to replace other kinds of cars anytime soon. So the public is going to be the one that really drives this. And I think one example is the electric bike industry, which is huge in other parts of the world and is growing by at least 20 to 30% a year in the U.S. right now, even though it's still very small. So I think the consumers are going to be the ones to decide where we're going to go with this. And as soon as we have lots and lots of bicycles riding around the street, then people start demanding we want safe lanes to drive in, or own lanes to drive in. So that begins to push local government and industry toward more and more, and that begins to replace other options as soon as those become cheaper and safer and respected ways of being able to get around. So we're already seeing big changes in some of those areas, and I really expect that to accelerate.
Yeah, I did notice when when we were over in Europe, that they seem to be leaps and bounds ahead of us as far as that's concerned. There was lanes for buses that was specifically for them, lanes for cars, lanes for bicycles, and everybody was riding bicycles. If they weren't riding bicycles, they were on scooters, and it seemed like the fewest amount was the cars. So,
and that's really true. And I think one of the factors that people don't think about is that they're paying $10 to gasoline and have been a couple of decades. So the economics is shifting people toward these things that we used to call alternatives, but now it just becomes a logical way to get around. Back in 2005 was the peak of American driving, and it's been slowly going down since then. A lot of the millennials and younger people are choosing to buy a smartphone instead of buying a car. So I think we're seeing a cultural shift where automobiles are really the amount of automobiles is slowly being kind of cut away for a variety of reasons. Anything from just the cost of fuel to the cost of insurance to the fact that the kids don't necessarily, aren't as enamored by being able to drive everywhere because you can't. The traffic is so bad.
Cool. Let's shift gears a little bit. And Daryl, you had mentioned that Elon Musk's Hyperloop was open source. Let's talk about the ET3 business model. From what I understand, you're doing an open consortium.
Yes, that's correct. Open source has a lot of really innovative and wonderful ideas, as far as creation of software. But one of the problems with open source is that it usually attracts kind of second tier, bottom of the rung technologies that are then cobbled together to create value for participants, which leverages the long tail of small contributions of many, many people to patch those technologies together and improve them for the benefit of everybody. So that consortium model is something that we want to leverage and to be able to take advantage of small contributions from a lot of people, but at the same time to honor the value of those contributions and the intellectual property valuation that really drives the economy and drives people to make larger investments, like the companies that make the competing software against Linux, for instance, Apple and Microsoft. They'll pay an engineer $200,000 a year to write 100,000 lines of code. So a person as an enthusiast in an open source situation is not going to be a rock star and write 100 lines of code for no payment. They've got to put food on the table.
Right.
So the hybrid model, the open consortium model, is able to function in both sides of that by honoring the value of intellectual property in an open consortium way. We can attract people that have already been made investments in their technology as another income source and another way to pay for that technology, and also to attract people to make improvements and spend more time on making those improvements because they have then a means of recovering that investment at a time through the respect for the value of the intellectual property improvement. So that open consortium model is able to leverage both ways of doing business.
That's interesting. Zev, in the other industries, do you see different kinds of business models as well, or is it more traditional?
I think some of the more interesting ones are things like the bike rental, either urban bikes, either regular bikes or e-bikes, where there are stations around. It's been happening in Europe for a while. It's beginning to happen in the United States, where people become a member. There's car share. I'm not promoting cars, but the whole idea of being able to take the transportation mode and use it when you need to and only pay for it when you need to. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that and more, the technology for these, for the most part, are simpler. So, but it may be more of a pay-as-you-go, where you may have a membership in some kind of a PRT system where you just slot your card in and it comes and you get a bill at the end of the month, that kind of thing. So I think we're starting to see more pay-as-you-go type situations.
I'm witnessing that here too. In LA, they have different companies. Like one is called Lyft, Lyft, and basically it's a taxi service, but it's individual people that drive you to wherever you want to be. So what you do is you launch the app, and you see the Lyft drivers around you. They're just like people like you and me, and they want to drive, and they'll come pick you up, take you where do you go, and you pay through the app on the phone, and it's like half the cost of a taxi rider or taxi drive. I know Denver there has one called Uber. I think they might be located here too, but it's the same thing. It's really cool to see these different business models that's beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, and as we watch the price of gasoline climb higher and higher, staying at $106, $107 a barrel, I don't think it's going to go down anytime soon, if ever.
Yeah.
We're going to see more and more creative ways of getting around, as well as more and more people moving into urban centers so that they aren't quite as dependent on needing to drive around as much. But when they do, they're going to have these more innovative options available to them.
Right. Well, let's start wrapping this up. I want to give you some time to talk about what you want to talk about the Aster Foundation conference coming up, Zev, and then Daryl, I'll give you the last word.
Okay, I just had one other question, Zev. When is that conference, Zev? What are the dates and what is the schedule?
Great, thanks for asking. The dates are October 10th and 11th, so it starts Thursday evening. We'll start off with the whole idea is to try to give people an opportunity to interact a lot. So we'll start off with a reception and kind of networking. There'll be an opening presentation on Thursday night. There'll be exhibits and an opportunity for people to talk to each other and find out what's going on. I know that the ET3 capsule mock-up will be there. And then Friday, we'll start first thing in the morning, and we'll have a series of presentations. We'll have a couple of concurrent presentations. We'll be serving lunch as well, and really providing an opportunity for people to be able to find out who each other is. And that ends on Friday at about 6 o'clock. It's about 24 hours. It's going to be located in Broomfield, Colorado, which is about a 30-minute drive from DIA. If you happen to be in the Denver area, Broomfield is right between Boulder and Denver at the Renaissance Flatiron Hotel. The best thing to do is just go to the foundation website, and that's theasterfoundation.org, and click up at the top, the October conference, and all the information will be there. Early registration ends on September 10th, so you have about 10 days to get in for $95 for the whole thing, including food and presentations and all that. So it's not expensive, and I think it's going to be an incredible opportunity to meet some real leading-edge thinkers in the field.
That's awesome, Zev. I can't wait to I'm going to be out there. I've already got my plane tickets, and I'm ready to go.
Looking forward to having you here, Jordet.
So, Daryl, I'm going to give you the last word here. You talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, there's a couple of things that frequently come up for people that we haven't covered here, and everybody has thought about toilets.
Oh, yeah.
We kind of think of public transportation as having toilets on the trains or on the aircraft. But think of ET3 as a car and not train or not a plane, where you have hundreds of people that all have to be, in that same vehicle for 10 hours while it's flying across the Pacific Ocean, for instance. So with ET3, the vehicle is automated, but the occupants can control the vehicle or request that it make a stop at any time. Just like a car on a freeway, the access portals for ET3 will be never farther than 15 minutes apart, and usually probably an average of 5 or 10 minutes apart. So the average wait to get to facilities might be only a typical 3 or 4 minute wait. So the passengers are in control of the vehicle, and very few cars are equipped with toilets. The same way with ET. If you want to have your own specialized capsule, that's a possibility with ET3. And if you want to carry your toilet around with you in your car or in your ET3 capsule, that could be your prerogative at your own expense and your own cost, if that made you feel more secure or comfortable. But I guess that's why they come up with the pins and other things like that for people that can't be far than 5 or 10 minutes from a toilet at any time.
Right. What about terrorism, sabotage?
Oh, well, yeah, that comes up all the time, too. And, it's unfortunate that terrorism does exist in the world. We believe that ET3 will help alleviate a lot of the conditions that allow terrorism to thrive, that by building bridges between cultures instead of walls, that we can have a much more understanding world, that the conditions that allow terrorism to thrive will thrive.
Are you there? Hey, Daryl, we lost you for a second. Are you back?
Can you hear me?
I got you now.
Here.
Yep.
Okay. The conditions that allow terrorism to thrive will largely melt away. But also ET3 will be less prone to terrorism because people will be far less concentrated in ET3 than they are in buses, trains, and planes, where you have 1,000 people on a train that could be derailed into another train with 1,000 people by a terrorist with a cutting torch going out there cutting the rails on a track.
Right, that makes sense.
ET3, those same 2,000 people would be spread out over 35 times more distance. And so it will have about a 35th of the risk of terrorism that our other modes do. But let's put the focus where it really most important. If we're really concerned about safety, why don't we put the focus on what is killing 99% of the people instead of putting the undue focus on what is responsible for less than 1% transportation-related deaths.
And you're talking about the cars today, right?
The car today, failure to control the vehicle and failure to control the conditions of travel.
Yeah.
Both of those conditions and problems are substantially eliminated with automation of transportation and travel in a tube environment that is isolated from all the chaos of weather and kids on bicycles run out in front of the vehicles, and all those things cannot happen with ET3.
That is some fantastic stuff. It's been an enlightening hour. I hate to wrap it up, but we have to. So thanks so much for your guys' time, and I can't wait to see both of you at the conference in October.
Thank you, Jordet. Appreciate the opportunity, and looking forward to meeting you as well.
See you guys.
Hey, looking forward to seeing you again, Jordet. Thank you.
You bet. Bye.